Hello, people of this world watching internet videos that have to do with cars. Welcome to this. My 1974 RA21 Toyota Celica, which will be soon powered by a Toyota Tundra V8. In the last couple videos, I took care of doing all the small gauge wiring, mostly the sensors and the connectivity for the ECU. Now what I have left is the large gauge stuff. This right here is 1/0 welding wire. Welding wire is much more flexible, and that's why I prefer using it for battery cables. The reason it is more flexible is because it has finer strands of copper on the inside. It's more expensive, but honestly I feel it's worth it for the ease of use, especially on custom stuff. This right here is something that I've been using long before I was doing YouTube. Is a company that makes fuse boxes for marine applications, which makes them great for automotive because they're weather resistant. And this is literally a perfect spot for it. I already have a hole tapped and threaded and everything. None of these products are sponsored, but I'll put a link to them down below for you. The hole is literally almost the perfect size for the hardware. So he said, hand device. Right underneath this billet pulley bracket is my alternator. So putting this right next to the alternator, it'll literally only have to go a couple inches into a fused location, which is super safe. All this is gonna come back out when I paint the engine bay, so I'm just temporarily mounting it so I can route my wires. Now to offset the additional 126 pounds from the 2UZ over the 18R iron block iron head 4-cylinder I pulled out of it, I'm relocating the battery, which is 46 pounds, to the trunk. These are the original two AC lines. Whether or not I'll be able to keep AC is still kind of up in the air. I'm gonna try, but that's a perfect size hole under it for, I think this is literally the right size. This is the bulkhead for the battery cable. Yeah, a little bit bigger. Still perfect clearance though for those two AC lines. I love that. The largest stepper bit I have is just barely too small for the diameter of this. Luckily it's like super thin sheet metal though. When I paint the engine bay, this will get primer on it and it'll get cleaned up nicely. This is sweet. I only have to run from here to the fuse, stick it in the crimper. Yep, that's pretty good. I can't pull it apart. Man, I need like a 90-degree cable for that. Oh, my cutter's got a big chip in it. I don't know if this is possible, but I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm sorry my shop's a mess. Custom 90-degree fitting. Yeah, that'll work. I think there's still room to get a nut on it. Mark where to cut this. All right, a little bit longer than I measured. Add about 5% extra so I can flip the bulkhead around when I paint the bay. I say that's good. Oh, sweet. There's a channel that goes right through the, oh, that's amazing. It's almost like this car was designed for this. I can pass it right through there. Obviously, I'm gonna put a protective grommet of a form on there. It has to go underneath the seat mount right here. Oh great, I had a bunch of screws on the seat. This is why I can't have nice things like organization. Ouch, no way. I literally have one grommet, actually the right size. I'm gonna be shocked, because it looks pretty close. No, no way, it is right size. Time for a hole literally as low in that corner as possible. Not that the back seat of this car will likely see many passengers. Also, the back of the seat is made out of foam, so it's not really a hard surface. Use my magnet to pick up all the metal. Ah, it worked. Using quick detail wax as lube because it works amazing. It also doesn't leave a residue afterwards, and if there's ever a chance you're gonna smell the power cable, it will have a nice odor of limes. That's quite a bit of extra cable. It should be enough for doing the starter. As far as the battery goes, I had considered getting with a high-end lithium batteries, but honestly for the cost compared to an AGM, I just couldn't justify it. And also AGM's a lot better in cold climates than lithium batteries are. Yeah, I know, I live in Arizona. This is one of those car TV shows where everything is a paid product placement and the parts are free. So I gotta try to save money where I can in areas that aren't skimping out. And this will act as a ballast for weight distribution. Oh jeez! I don't have a battery box either. So I gotta plan for where there will be one. There's nothing solid underneath that. I think that's just a dumb idea. I think it makes more sense to have it firmly mounted at least half on this area. I don't know why why I'm so critical about the trunk storage capacity. It's a 50-year-old Toyota with a boatload of money dumped into it that's going to be super sketchy, so I don't think this is ever intended to be a daily driver. Also, the benefit of having it slightly over too is it gets the center mass a little bit closer to the inside of the middle of the car. I would say that's plenty of extra. Starter cable. Luckily, this doesn't have to go very far at all. Yeah, it can go under there because it can be disconnected from here when you pull the engine. Some of you were freaking out in the comments section in the last video, the fact that the starter is under the intake manifold. It takes like 30 minutes to pull this intake manifold off, and it's gonna have to be done once maybe every 50 years on this car. Like, come on. Another massive benefit to the starter location is because of the fact that this is a 4-cam engine. Oh geez, heat shrink. Yes, this is black heat shrink. There's a reason for that. Which makes this considerably wider than something like a LS V8, which is a pushrod overhead valve engine and a lot narrower. So had the starter been hanging off the side of this engine, it would have drastically reduced the amount of room I had along the frame rails to run headers. It's the following day, and this is the final big power cable. Done. Now all of these are going to get loomed when I loom all the wires in the engine bay, but for now I'm just test fitting everything. Doesn't need to be loomed yet. Now you may notice this cable is a hair extra long than it should be, and that is because when I paint the engine bay, this little red power bulkhead you see is going to get flipped the other way around with the threads of the plastic portion facing inside the car, so it'll be about an inch shorter. Dangerousing, dangerousing. Doing what dumb people do before they get hurt. Dangerousing, dangerousing. I don't want you to be a dumb person that gets hurt. Aha! There it is. Lots of test tape. I did quite a bit on the ends just because of where this one's located. Kind of tricky to route this. Basically like that. So you probably noticed there's an excess bunch of wire right here that's not hooked up to anything. 90% of that I don't need. Reverse fishing is not as fun unless you're the fish. I don't know what that means. This one's not gonna go peacefully. I've been a bit overcautiously waiting to pull these wires back and remove them. You notice my checklist is a way more complete. Gray, white, gray, purple. Because I did that last minute change to drive-by-wire with the 3UZ throttle body, it needs a signal to plus and minus for what you're doing with your foot. These will be my drive-by-wire circuit. Since the factory Celica fuse box, the only fuse box for this car that it had originally, was located under the dash as a little glass style fuse box, I picked up this new modern mini fuse box made in Italy. It's a hell of a nice one. There's a pun there if you got it. So my cable, where did I put my snippers? This is like the first time I've been able to capture this on camera, but can you see the olive green in the flop of this paint? It hides on camera for some reason. These are really hard to crimp because it's such large gauge. I gotta make this less of a mess for my own sanity. Steering column, drop. Okay, so this is all the ECU, the new ECU. Oh my god, that's a mess. Because at this point in time, I realized I had a massive nightmare on my hands. Trying to tie in the ignition switch over to the starter solenoid, I discovered the reason why this has a security sticker on the front windshield. Ouch. Or so I thought. Well, sad day for Sarah. Sad day. What? There's an outlet inside the glove box? What? That is so weird. This thing had a power inverter? And the surprises didn't stop there. Behind the glove box, belt interlock? Oh, that's not the alarm system. That's the seatbelt warning system. That's why it's tied into the ignition switch. So if your seatbelts aren't buckled, it'll go bzzz. I'm gonna leave it because it's factory, but I still don't understand why it's not on the wiring schematic for this car. I undid all of these looms underneath the dash and I had to, but man, I regret it. This huge mess has to live in this area. Hello and welcome to the following day. Got another car review shot, back to work. I'm gonna turn this into a fuse box. Go. brand new and it's 50 years old. Nothing really changed with the wiring right here. This all goes for the lights to the back of the car, and some of the stuff goes to the heater core, which sits right here. This part's as simple as matching up the old fuse box with the new fuse box. Radio. Don't call me radio unit 91. Don't call me unit 91 radio. There you go. Whoever sent me these wire strippers, thank you. I lost my other ones. I don't know where they were. Ah, so much better. 3C terminal 1. This wire right here is going to allow the factory ammeter, despite having a different amperage alternator, to work in this car. I'll explain in a second. This, with the exception of adding the grounds for the ECU and the starter relay, is ready to try to apply power and eventually start the car. Common sense would dictate that yes, all that is going to get loomed and wrapped and made look pretty, but first I gotta make sure it works. This power circuit right here that is going to tie into battery power at the bulkhead for the battery supply to the inner fuse box first makes a stop at the starter relay. This right here is the wire you're looking at. It's going to have a 40 amp fuse at the end of it where it gets connected to the bulkhead battery source. It then ties into the starter relay, and then it will provide potential to the starter relay once the contacts close from a signal coming from the start switch in the ECU. Then that same 10 gauge white wire provides potential to the ammeter, which from the factory was rated for 55 amps because this car had either a 50 or 55 amp alternator on it. And then to lastly, the interior fuse box as a power source. So essentially what I just did is use the power supply for the internal circuits in the car as a current divider circuit for the ammeter. I'm sure someone in the comments capable of doing the math about how accurate the gauge will still be, and honestly I don't think it's gonna be that far off. And whether it is or not doesn't matter, it's just being able to see whether the charging system's still functioning or not. And this is way better than just having a dead gauge on my dash that no longer functions. So it might have been a little bit neater to put the fuse underneath the dash right next to the starter relay, but I want it to be super safe, so I'm putting it right next to the battery bulkhead. That's the closest source of power. And this will hide nicely into the harness. Toyota gasket intake. Time for these. And you put this. Ooh. Just to be safe, might as well vacuum. Did you actually think it would be possible to watch an entire video without seeing me at least clean something? Well, it's like a plastic MLS. This is kind of neat. The 3UZ aluminum intake manifold uses a different style gasket than the plastic 2UZ ones. That means the torque specs are going to be different as well. Lower intake manifold to cylinder head, 18 Newton meters or 13 pound-feet. Oh, I don't want to squish any wires. This part sucks. Carefully. Just when you thought this couldn't be any more confusing and hard to follow, this is a front bumper bracket. Why a front bumper bracket, you didn't ask? Because if I don't know this now, I could do a bunch of work for nothing. Oh, sweet. The hardware got powder coated as well. I thought it was gonna be a pain to get this thing off. That's what she said. Moment of truth. A lot of you have been asking whether or not I was going to have air conditioning in this car, since originally from the factory was equipped with it. And the truthful answer is I have not known up until this point. The idea was to try to keep it, but I have to be reasonable because I'm stuffing a Toyota Tundra engine in a 74 Celica. The limiting factor to whether AC is going to be possible or not is going to be whether or not I have room for the condenser. The other factor is whether or not I can clear the oil cooler lines behind the compressor. Wow, I didn't realize the nose of this car stood out so far. Holy shit. That is insane. I didn't know I had that much room behind the grill. So a couple of videos ago, I had to get the radiator modified and flip the inlet and outlet to the other side so it would match that of a Tundra. That is done. The only downside is because the radiator itself is so thin, it slightly bowed the top from having to weld on it. But I have all the genuine Toyota decals that go in the engine bay of the Tundra, and the belt routing guide as well as the coolant label goes on the radiator core support in those trucks. So it will cover that area and you won't even see it. Just slide this boy into place. I would say, just by guessing, there's room for AC condenser, but I gotta put the actual grill and headlight trim around to see. For those of you that know the UZ engines in these trucks, they have a massive ugly oil cooler and oil filter. this is the solution. It's actually a small business here in Arizona that makes these things. I'll put the link in the video description. It wasn't sponsored, but this is gonna let me put my oil filter wherever I want in the engine bay, as well as run an external oil cooler, which probably is gonna be a good idea. I doubt this AC compressor got much use in New Hampshire since you don't even really need AC there. I'll use this one for mock-up. No way! Shout out to Blake Machine Co. for making that little block for the oil cooler lines. It actually clears the AC compressor. I just slid this down to hold it in place, but the edge of the radiator will actually be flush with this, so I'm gonna gain a little bit more room, but that does not give me much room for cooling fans. This is the original AC condenser, which they don't make anymore. This is gonna need custom brackets, but this is gonna be an incredibly crude mock-up, but that's really all I need to know if this is gonna work. And this is not gonna work, there's no way. And I gotta try to route the lines up through here as well. There's a piece of decorative sheet metal that goes around the bottom of the headlights and it flows in front of the grill right here. And it all has to attach to the core support. So if this is all pushed out, none of that is gonna be able to attach and it'll be cut up and ruined essentially. It's deceiving because you see the bumper would stick out really far, so you think you have all that room. But down here you have the chin spoiler that attaches right here to this sheet metal. And then also the hood opens backwards on these cars. So this area is super critical because this is the pivot point for the hood to open and close. Additionally, you can see how far the radiator is already pushed into the engine bay, so I'm gonna lose even more clearance when this is in its final home. Is it weird that I'm not sad that I have to ditch AC on this thing? I mean, it's a weight reduction. That's like 20 pounds right here shaved off the nose of the car, and it gives way more room now for cooling fans and also to do the oil cooler in the front. So it's a trade-off. I'm sticking a Tundra engine in this little tiny car, so. And I know someone's going to suggest doing an electric AC conversion, and that does not help this situation because my compressor fits. And to add to all that, I also have to be careful of cooling on this thing as well, because this is the largest radiator I can fit on this thing, and if I impede it by adding more stuff, there's too many issues stacking up here. But I have good news. In the next video, I'm going to be able to hook up the battery now and start testing these circuits to make sure everything works, so I can start looming it. I'm sorry for those that their attention spans have been diminished to that of lime jello. This is how you build cars in real life, so it'll be a couple more videos until I can actually start it. And let me know in the comment section if you guys want to see an MR2 video, because I got a ton of good parts from Japan for this thing that are just waiting to go on. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye!